Hello, it's Elysha. Welcome back. Today I am talking about how the fashion industry killed my confidence. Now, I'm sure you're familiar with stories of how the fashion industry has impacted the self-esteem of women and girls by perpetuating this unrealistic expectation for perfection, or basically an ideal that's not really attainable for a lot of women. Well, that is not the experience that I'm going to share with you today. I have been working in the fashion industry since the 90s as a stylist, so I'm going to talk about how the fashion industry killed my confidence as a stylist working in the industry, and then I am going to share what I did to bring my confidence back. So when I started styling, it was back in the 90s, 1995, and the job of a stylist, it was not out there at all. Nobody knew what a stylist was. In fact, whenever I would meet people, there was always this moment of education where I had to explain exactly what I did for a living. So there was no social media. It wasn't like I saw other stylists on Instagram posting or the hashtag BTS. The stylist position really was a behind the scenes position that nobody knew about. So I didn't know any stylists, but I did know a bunch of photographers, and photographers work with stylists, so these photographers made the introductions for me to other stylists so I could get my first assisting job. Now, a lot of the girls who get into fashion or who want to be stylists, it's because they love clothes. They're like obsessed with designers and trends, and they want to get into the industry because of that. But I was different. See, when I was younger, it wasn't that I was obsessed with clothing, fashion designers. I was just into expressing myself creatively, and for me, putting together outfits in whatever way that I could. Sometimes they looked good, other times they were a little weird, and for me, that was the whole thing. I just liked putting together outfits. I liked to creatively express myself. So I, right from the get-go, was a little bit different than the other girls who were in fashion. So when I had my first assisting job, and I worked with this woman for a while, I think we worked together for many months, and she was a high-end fashion stylist. We'd work together, we would go to all the high-end showrooms, and she'd pull clothes, and this is what we did for weeks, for months, for commercials, for magazine shoots. Anyhow, one time I get into the car with her, and she asks me who my favorite designer is. And now this was at the beginning of my styling career, and I didn't have a favorite designer. I didn't even know the designers to begin with. So when she asked me this, I didn't know what to say because I didn't have a designer. And I just remember she was so appalled with me not having an answer. She actually didn't believe me. She's like, "You're kidding, you do too." I was like, "No, actually I don't." And I was like, "Well, who's yours?" And this was 1995. She told me hers was Helmut Lang. And I just felt really bad about myself that I didn't know the designers and I didn't have a favorite. And when I worked with this woman a lot, I second guessed my decision for getting into this industry because I felt ill-equipped. I felt like I didn't have what it took to do the job well. And, you know, this woman who was appalled by me not knowing the designers, this reinforced this belief that I created for myself that I wasn't the right person to be a stylist. So that's how the whole thing started out. So right then, my confidence is getting a little bit shaky. And then I started doing my own jobs. I wasn't assisting anymore, so I didn't have to answer to that, but I had someone else I had to answer to. Basically, I would get hired to do these. I was doing a lot of editorial at the time, magazine shoots. I was doing front of book stuff, so they would basically hire me to go pull, you know, I'd have to get like 20 leather jackets for their 7 leather jackets that are smooth like butter. Like, that wasn't actually the name of the story. I don't remember what the names were, but my job was to get all of these leather jackets. And the way that it works is the designers, the showrooms, the brands, they would loan the leather jackets or the merchandise, the samples, their samples actually, they would loan them out in exchange for publicity. So it sounds like, yeah, of course everybody would do it because they were getting free publicity. So I'd call these showrooms. There was no email back then, definitely not emailing, definitely using the phone. And I would call these showrooms and most people would never even take my call. And if they did take my call, then finally they would say, like, you're not the right fit for us. Because the magazines that I was working for, these were women's mainstream publications. You would see them in line at the grocery checkout. They were not high fashion at all. But I just want to point out that these brands that I was contacting, I wasn't contacting high-end fashion brands. I was contacting mall stores to try to get their clothes, their leather jackets. And basically they were telling me that I wasn't the right fit. Now they were referring to the magazine, but I was hearing this over and over and over again. You're not the right fit, you're too low quality, you're too low budget, you're too cheap. So these are all the things that I'm hearing on a regular basis as I'm just trying to do my job. So that certainly didn't help my confidence. Now, another thing that happened to me is that I would get invited to fashion shows. And again, this is like way back in the beginning. I would get invited to fashion shows and it was never an enjoyable experience for me. So nowadays there's this whole spectacle that goes on outside of the show. Like I think you could just go to Fashion Week and not actually even go into the shows and be fully entertained. Maybe you'd get your picture taken, maybe you'd be featured somewhere, but it wasn't like that back then. The shows were at Bryant Park, and I just remember this one experience. It was at Nicole Miller, and I went by myself, and I was waiting outside to get in, waiting. Everybody else is going in, and finally the lights go down, the show starts, and then they're like, oh, okay, yeah, you can come in. And they basically put me in a seat. It was like 5 feet from where I'd been standing and waiting. So it wasn't a good seat nonetheless. And every time I went to a fashion show, it just reaffirmed this belief that I had about myself, that I didn't belong, I was an outsider, I didn't even deserve a seat there. So I really felt on the outside going through my career in the 90s and even into the 2000s. It was like this for me. So I'm gonna tell you what I did, what turned it around, and how I ultimately got my confidence back. So it was in the early 2000s, I actually got really into yoga. I started practicing yoga regularly, and I got so into it. I even did a teacher training and I started teaching, but it wasn't the teaching yoga that really did it. It was just practicing something, committing to it, and I was seeing progress. I was getting results. I noticed how I could do the poses better by constantly practicing them. So I started to get confident in yoga. And I would go stand in the front of the class, like I would, take my spot. I always went to the front of the class in yoga. So my confidence was coming back in yoga. And it is because of this that I was able to carry this confidence into the rest of my life and to back in the fashion industry and onto the shoots that I was working on. So by having this practice of yoga, and yes, it was the philosophy, the mindfulness, the meditation, the body awareness, and all that stuff definitely helped my confidence. But I believe it could have been anything that I was doing as a hobby on the side, something that I could just keep doing and get really good at. It could have been anything. And so for me, it happened to be yoga. But there was one other thing about doing yoga that brought me back into my role as a stylist with just a new perspective, and that was that in yoga it is self-expression. So you are constantly moving through these poses and you are finding your expression in your body through these poses. So it is a form of self-awareness and self-expression. And that is why I got into fashion in the first place. I wasn't like the other girls who were obsessed with the clothes. I was more into self-expression, into creative self-expression. So by doing yoga, it reconnected me to this part of myself that it kind of just got forgotten about in the 90s and early 2000s while I was styling. I just completely lost touch with that whole aspect of using fashion for creative self-expression. But once I got into yoga, then it reminded me that this is a possibility. This is something I can do. So I found my way. I found the way to bring that back into my styling. Now, I don't really do that much editorial anymore, so I don't really deal with the showrooms, and well, I'm not assisting, and the people who I do work with, I found a really good group of people who I work with, and they're definitely not judging me for my what designers I like or what I don't like and who's my favorite. And I found this way to bring this creative self-expression back into styling, and the way that I do that is by working with women. So that really has become the passion and what I've made my styling career about. It's about, yes, I love to put together an outfit that I put it on and I love how I look and I'm like, this is so me and I feel so good. But what I really love doing is helping other women to creatively self-express themselves so that they can find the confidence through how they're putting their outfits together and what they're wearing, because that's really what it was for me at the beginning. When I was young, I used to get confidence from the clothes that I wore, and then working as a stylist, somehow I completely lost touch with that. But now, after doing yoga, and it's been so many years, I have been able to bring that back into the work that I do, and that is truly what fulfills me, and that's what makes me find the joy in the work that I'm doing. So that's my story about how the fashion industry killed my confidence and how I got it back. It was through finding passion in yoga and self-expression. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and please share it if you think that you know somebody who would get some value from it. And if you did like the video, please give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe, because I'll be back here next week with a brand new video. Okay, I will see you then. Bye.